Hello, good morning to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for registering for our mini webinar, our 15-minute webinar to be exact, on should you monitor workers who aren't social distancing off duty. And this indeed is a very hot topic right now, very important for us to discuss to help you as the employer to protect your company, as well as looking out for your employees, as well as your target audience as well too. So we're just going to go down and dive right on in so that we can keep with our 15 minutes and still get all the information needed. So I am Elizabeth Fletcher, the HR manager here with ClickOnHR, and we have an amazing core HR team of over 35 years of experience, and they are Rhea Stone, our dynamic leader, CEO, Melanie Hernandez, recruiter, Hope Deanda, HR assistant. And as I said, you have myself, Elizabeth Fletcher. So let's just dive right on in. So COVID-19 is a pandemic that has swept the rug from underneath the feet of every person literally on the planet. And our lives have changed drastically, from social distancing measures being enforced to entire cities being subject to mandatory lockdown, and curfews have been put in place to control the spread of COVID-19. Suffice to say, the world is literally turned upside down. So an overview of the impact of COVID-19 on businesses and the workplace, is very important to be had. Summer is near, and many stir-crazy employees, such as myself, we're eager to get outdoors. I miss my family, I miss the beach, and I miss all kinds of social outings despite the pandemic. So I understand that as employers, if you choose to monitor off-duty conduct, you just want to make sure that it's legal, especially if you're going to be sending workers home. And also if an employer, such as yourselves, learn that an employee is not following those social distancing guidelines away from work, you may be able to ask them to stay home for 14 days to make sure that they're socially distancing and also being healthy as they return back to work, right? So the bigger picture is clear, and it's incredibly troublesome. But for businesses that continue to operate with employees working under new work from home policies, there is a larger responsibility to ensure that the cost of employment is not levied upon the workers. These are unprecedented times filled with fear, anxiety, and a loss of a living sense. In such time, how businesses treat their employees is essential in the long-term relationship that businesses want to have with its workers, the culture it wants to propagate, and of course, the culture that it wants to establish, which for some may already be too late, but that does not mean it can't be restored. So from a practical standpoint, it could be difficult to monitor these persons social distancing outside of the workplace to send them home for those 14 days if there's an alleged violation. So let's get to some of the practical difficulties. And there's two to get straight to it. Those two practical potential problems of monitoring social distancing away from work could be poor morale and, of course, bad publicity. And in this day and age right now, since everyone is working from home, a lot of people are glued to their devices, especially social media. You don't want the bad publicity because that word of mouth that will pass is definitely not good for business, as we all know. So measures could be including following. Simply put, the CDC guidelines for cleaning, wearing personal protective equipment, and of course, social distancing at work too, not just away from work. Because we want to make sure that we stay consistent across the board, that you're not in the same office space and not social distancing, but still wanting to monitor your employees outside of work to make sure that they're not social distancing too. So doing this can reduce the potential for transmission of the virus that are much more manageable from a business standpoint. And that's the important part for sure. So one of the leading practices that I see around me that businesses have resorted to is activity monitoring or productivity monitoring. And this is a set of practices made possible by digital tools to monitor and track employee activity during work hours, which include, but not limited to, URL tracking, application tracking, document tracking, and also time tracking. And here's why I think that monitoring activity and productivity using software is an unhealthy business practice that sets the wrong culture, and it also sends the wrong message, and it's counterproductive to your business employee retention rate too. So, employers might ask in a daily health survey if workers have been in close contact with a confirmed or presumptive case of COVID-19, or are you complying with any state or local stay-at-home orders? And that's the important part too. I know a lot of cities right now, and I know a lot of you that are tuning in with this, you're coming from different industries and you're coming from different cities. And even in Houston alone, we have, of course, the city of Houston rules, as well as our different counties, such as Harris County being one of the largest counties that there is. But employers nonetheless should follow any applicable state statutes that protect employees from being disciplined for lawful off-duty activity. And that possibility of a liability under a lawful use statute or possible discrimination claims should be balanced across the board against the duty to keep the workplace safe, because it's very important, and of course to combat against lawsuits as well too. So productivity management is, in my opinion, like I said, the failure of a business to establish clear KPIs, right? These KPIs should direct your perception of whether an employee is productive or unproductive. If they are doing their job within the deadline that they are assigned, then there isn't a productivity problem at all. The need for such monitoring arises when you don't have a clear idea of how much should the employee be expected per day, per week, or per month, depending on their position, of course, within the company. The lack of KPIs forces businesses to micromanage and track activity. And this is something that's risen in times when people are working from home, especially. So softwares such as Desk Time, it's being used as productivity trackers for spying on employee activities. But the impact of such a step is truthfully, fundamentally negative. And like I said, it sends out the message that companies, you don't trust your employees to take responsibility, which, as I said in the previous slide, becomes a real morale killer and can often reduce productivity indirectly by affecting the happiness of the employee. And let's be honest, right now, mental happiness is so important. I know a lot of you have been pushing out, your EAP plans and different things because a lot of people are working from home and they're not used to it. A lot of us didn't even know parts of our home, what they look like, because we're not home so often. We're so used to being around our colleagues, our families, and out and about. So an employer should also be cautious about acting based on speculation, right? An employee who visited a popular beach or park might have been able to actually maintain social distancing, because there may be an element of subjectivity to what constitutes good social distancing practices, and employers must make sure that you're very careful to avoid uneven enforcement that could be perceived as unfair or discriminatory. We just had Memorial Day weekend, for example, and a lot of us, especially in Texas, right? I'm in Texas here with ClickOnHR, and everyone knows that Texas people love a good barbecue. So just because that person went with their family for Memorial Day and had that awesome, ribs falling off the bone does not mean that they didn't practice social distancing with their families. So make sure that it's not perceived to be unfair, for sure. And at the same time, employers also have a very, very, very serious responsibility and an obligation to protect coworkers from reckless colleagues who jeopardizes the safety of the workplace too. So if an employee has participated in a large gathering where social distancing was not practiced, the employer likely would be justified in asking the employee to stay at home for 14 days or less in certain circumstances, right? Following those CDC guidelines. The employer also might require the person to be tested for the coronavirus before returning to work. And again, this is all very understandable. All of us know that when we work with our coworkers, we become very, very used to having them as like family and loving on them in that workspace, because a lot of times we see our coworkers more than we actually see our family members. So we want to make sure that we're keeping everyone safe. And I think a lot of this can be combated by having town hall meetings, whether it's still virtual, with your employees, and just being very transparent and letting them know, hey, we care about you, you guys. And we also want to make sure that we have a safe environment for each and every one of you. So maybe showing examples of social distancing. Because right now, like I say, you have to be aware of the speculation. There's subjectivity. A lot of us think that we're, doing, practicing social distancing, and maybe we're not. So maybe if you're showing examples transparently across the board and communicating that, it definitely would help and save a lot of the speculation, so that you're all on the same page and it doesn't leave too much to be desired, right? Then the assumption is then pushed down to a minimum. And that's the part that's very important. This is all so new to us, right? We've never went through this. The last pandemic like this that was so big was what, in 1928, I think 1918 with the Spanish flu. So a lot of us weren't even born. We've read about it, we've seen it, but being very, very just delicate with each other and using compassion and understanding goes a long way, especially in a company's culture. So I definitely want to let you all know too, you're more than welcome to put questions in the chat, but I want to leave you with 3 do's and 3 don'ts to take away that I think is going to be of very, very, very of utmost importance for you. So those 3 do's are: do have a plan to manage employee social media use, right? Developing a social media policy makes business and legal sense. A social media policy assists companies in managing employee social media in order to limit exposure to costly legal problems. A social media policy also serves as communication guidelines that empowers employees with the information that they need in order to use social media in a responsible manner. Second do implement a social media policy. Employers must have a plan on how to manage social media use in the workplace. Failing to do so can have serious consequences. Employers can be held vicariously liable for legal and regulatory liability arising out of their employees' social media use, such as for an employee's discriminatory or harassing social media messages, comments, or tweets, right? The third do is monitor your employees' social media responsibly. Some critics say that, this is an exaggeration, that most of what people post on social networks is private and perfectly harmless and has no bearing on their work. Not so much. You may discover that your employees are possibly even stealing your time, and you would be within your right at that point to definitely discipline or terminate that employee. So then let's get to the 3 don'ts, because we definitely want to make sure that we're protecting you, right? So those 3 don'ts are, the first don't is, do not overreach with your social media policy to prohibit protected activities. So generally speaking, a rule contained within a social media policy violates the NLRA when it precludes that employees from engaging in protected concerted activities. Employers commonly experience widespread negative publicity when found to have maintained an unlawful policy or work rule. So the second don't I want to leave you with is, do not enforce the policy inconsistently, okay? Be very consistent in enforcing disciplinary measures. Uniform enforcement of the policy will protect the employer in potential litigation, as it gives employees fewer reasons in support of their claims for, retaliation and of discipline or discharge. Similar violations of the policy should also result in similar discipline. The third don't is, don't forget to implement the policy on a company-wide basis. This is very important. The policy can be distributed at a company-wide meeting, sent by email, posted on the company website or intranet, and or included in the employee handbook. And the policy should be read and distributed at each and every time that a company amends, revises, or make additions to that policy. And these are definitely items that we at ClickOnHR specialize in to assist you. We also are offering a free 30-minute consultation with you. Please feel free to reach out to us. We're definitely looking forward to conversing and helping our neighboring small to medium-sized businesses as well too. So don't forget about us for sure. We're definitely only a click away. So if you have any questions, I'm going to check the chat. Oh, awesome. I see that we have a question here that says, can an employer mandate you to use your PTO while quarantining? And the answer is simply yes. I think that at this time, we have to remember that we have to work with our employer the same way we want our employer to work with us. PTO is definitely more of a luxury. They're not required to give you so much of this, a lot of time off in that regard. So if they're giving it to you as far as PTO, and I know a lot of companies have hefty PTO banks that they give, which is amazing, which is why we join these organizations, right? So what they're asking you fairly is to, hey, let's exhaust the PTO so that we can continue to employ you. I know a lot of companies, especially oil and gas, have been losing, a lot of business from the back end with OPEC and things like that. So all they're asking you to do is exhaust that PTO first, which is very understandable. So simply put, yes. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to email us at info@clickonhr.com. Give us a call at 1-833-CLICK-HR. We have an office in Midland, Texas as well. And a lot of us are working virtually here in Houston. But we are your premier virtual HR associates managers. And we look forward to working with each and every one of you. You can also follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and visit our website as well too. And again, don't forget that we're offering free 30-minute consultations. And we also have a newsletter that goes out once a month that we don't bombard you with things, but we definitely give informative information such as this in a concise understanding that you can quickly grasp. And if you have any more questions, you can definitely reach out to us. So we definitely look forward to having a working relationship with each and every one of you. And thank you so much for joining us here today. Have a great day. Be safe as you're social distancing, and we definitely look forward to work with you. Thank you.